I have agents that are my employees, if you will. They all are good at certain things because I've helped them learn what they need to be good at. They have the skills for it. I provide them the context to do it in the way that I actually want. And I command them to go hand off and supervise them to do things along the way. So what I'm left with is decision making.
Good morning, folks. Afternoon, I should say, for many of you in different time zones. We have two great speakers lined up. I mean, these are two of my favorite humans in tech, Mark and Kevin. For many of you, Mark Hull is no stranger. He's been on the Skip Coach circuit before. I've known Mark for a bit, but Mark, about a year ago, founded a company, and I think product careers and product managers moving into founders is one of my favorite directions that we're seeing in the last handful. And I think that founders just are on the bleeding edge of this sort of product management meets AI. He founded a company called Exceeds almost a year ago. And Exceeds really looks at how to measure AI adoption in enterprises and how that drives productivity, quality. And a lot of the conversations we're going to have are going to be influenced by what he's seeing both with his customers, as well as how he builds Exceeds themselves. And Kevin Yien, for those of you who don't know, has one of the top rated podcasts from Lenny. Kevin has so much knowledge around how product development should be done, how it has been done, and how he does it at Stripe, and how he's done it in the past as head of product. Both of these guys have been head of product in prior lives. And so I couldn't think of two better people to share with you their thoughts on AI, product management, and they put together a slide deck, which is exceeding expectations from my point of view. So it's a terrific conversation. I think in terms of structure, just given the number of people that we're going to have on the call, we probably won't do live conversation as much as using the chat window. So feel free to ask questions or chime in. And if you do have something live you want to contribute, you can raise your hands, and hopefully we'll have enough time to jam all of their content in and get your comments and questions as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. Kevin, welcome.
Thank you. And good to see some familiar faces. Good for all those I haven't met yet. And yes, good catch on the slide. Hopefully it's not a total waste, but something productive comes out of this. So really quick, we thought we would first give a preview to folks of what the structure of this is going to look like. Mark is going to first demo some crazy things. I will demo some less crazy things. And then we have some really contentious debate topics that we'll be sort of going through in a Lincoln Douglas style. A quick smattering of them. You can see on the screen right now, there's a lot of folks that are saying, PRDs are dead, prototype all the things, PM teams are shrinking, or maybe they're growing. We'll sort of debate both sides, both the hot take and the steel man counter argument. But I think what most people really want to see, and ideally hear, is just like, what are we actually doing? What are the ways to put this into practice? And how are we sort of pushing on the edges of what this can do? So with that, we have two very complementary things. But first up is Mark's Chaos Corner.
I love it. Thanks, Kevin. It's a really good articulation and visualization of what I feel my life like is on a regular basis. I want to provide just a little bit of context before I show a few different things today. And it's not going to be a long demo because, the last thing people want to do is watch other people type things into GPTs. But my company now is about 15 people. We're globally distributed. We're early stage startup, of course. And so I know that a lot of the ways that I'm working are in a place without constraints or rules that a lot of you also work in, and the reality of that. So obviously you're not necessarily vibe coding something and YOLOing it out to a production server in 30 seconds. I get it. But I do believe very strongly that things are changing rapidly in terms of the functional division now being eroded away very quickly, and that the role of a PM is changing significantly, especially in the artifacts that they're creating. You may have seen the post from the CPO of Microsoft yesterday, or just recently. I was basically saying that prompts are the new PRDs, which I couldn't agree more with. The last thing I'll basically say is that in my mind, and I've been doing this for way too long, it's been interesting to see how these artifacts change over time. Like the very first company I worked with was at Yahoo, and we didn't have these artifacts. You basically had a designer, an engineer, and a product person going and figuring it out. We didn't even know what a PRD was until the consultants came to town. And, these PRDs then basically became these documents that are big artifacts that were helping create a static point of view of what we should be doing that we're handed off to a bunch of people to go do the work, again, with these divided walls. And I think that that's really largely now out of date. Those PRDs are these artifacts of a legacy approach of building products that very quickly is becoming irrelevant. How far that holds from a very heavily regulated company, very different than an early stage consumer startup. But no matter what, I'm really viewing prompts as a new PRD, shifting coordination from static documents and endless meetings to dynamic instructions that are really aligning people, agents, and all the work that's actually happening on a regular basis. So I want to show you a couple ways that I'm actually doing that right now. It is going to be a little bit messy, and it'll be a little bit more from a command line interface, just because of some of the things I'm doing. I haven't put a nice glossy front end on it quite yet. But we'll give you a little bit of a taste of how this actually works right now, at least at my company. And the way that we are approaching it, just to give you a little context of what we do at my company, is that, okay, I have a globally distributed team. I am really the only product person, but everybody builds and ships code. Designers, interns, myself. I have way too many lines of code, which isn't necessarily a good thing, but we are all builders at heart at the end of the day. And so as part of this, the thing that's important for us is to provide that context and coordination quickly. I need to get information out to my team in Latin America or India about what we're doing and why. And I don't have time to sit with them and guide every step along the way. Now, we communicate very frequently, but for me to sit down and say, like, has everybody agreed on the requirements document? Has everybody viewed all this and signed off on it? Like, it's just not the reality of what we build. We ship continuously. We build all the time. I expect everyone to have ideas that they ship into production rapidly so we can learn quickly. And that's the thing for me, is that speed trumps everything. So this thing I built here in Cursor, there's a Claude Code version of it. There's other versions as well, but I think it's easier to display it and demonstrate it for you, is in Cursor, is what I call lovingly Kernel Sanders. Kernel, because it creates a context kernel of information that is assigned, and it goes through the whole creation or cooking process, if you will, to all these different agents to go deploy. And so the place I'm going to start today isn't necessarily where you always have to start, but is with basically a strategy document. And so I'm going to try to show that to you right now. This gives you the version of it. So basically, I put together this thing that says, here's who we're trying to serve and why, what the customer actually kind of looks like, and the problem we're trying to solve. And in my case, I'm trying to solve an AI observability problem for engineering managers. So basically, I will go into our tool and try to share back into Cursor for a second. And I'm going to ask it to, basically take my information and pull out the things that you actually care about. So a strategy document, again, personas, customers, why you're doing this, what the opportunity is, et cetera. So it's now running this thing that basically says, okay, I'm going to start to build context for me. Give me the ingredients for this recipe. That is, give me that strategic plan to help me do everything I'm going to do after this. And so I'm pasting that in there now. It's now processing it, and I'm probably not going to wait for everything to process here, but you can see what it's doing is that it's looking at the document I have, it's trying to pull out the signals that actually matter to give instructions to everyone else that it's going to work with. So if I were to carry this corollary to the real world, it is a product manager, sure, coming together with a strategy, but then helping provide that context to the design partner, to the engineer, to the data science person, to the researcher, whomever else. In my case, I don't have those 7 other functions. I have 7 other agents that I basically am doing the same exact thing. Here's what you need to understand in order to go do the jobs that you need to do. Now, the jobs I want them to do could be a bunch of things, like make requirements. I need requirements because I need the tasks, the engineers to go build the things I need to build, maybe AI engineers, but I need them to know what to actually do. Make an analytics spec. How's this going to be integrated in StatSig? What feature flags will it be behind? Create the dashboards that are actually part of this. When I'm ready to go to market, create some ads for me. So I have the creativity there that can actually integrate and instantly get the feedback for us as well. And on and on and on. From the design brief to the prototypes, I optimize for Figma Make in this case, research briefs that I can integrate with Polefish and get instant data. All the information that's coming these things, it's being extracted and created into what I call that kernel, again, the Kernel Sanders thing. I'm going to show you the pre-canned version of it so you don't have to wait any longer. And it's basically extracted this into this document here. This is JSON. I understand it's like hard. There's a whole other conversation we can have about JSON prompting here in a second. But the idea here is that I took my strategy doc, gave a bunch of information here that now the other agents can read. All right, so now I understand the context of that strategy document. What do I want to do next? Let's make some requirements. So I'll basically tell it next, which asks me what I wanted to do here. What do you want to do next? I said, make requirements. And then basically it created this. So it basically took that and said, from a feature standpoint, here's what you're trying to do, Mark. The scope of this feature is this. Here are the personas you're trying to serve. Here are the user stories that are actually behind it, and so on and so on. Here's the criteria, acceptance criteria, all those things that are part of it as well. That's awesome. What I want to do next is create the design brief. Same exact process. Here's what it knows about our design component library. So I'm not reinventing it every time, but this is what I will use for the prototyping tool, for the ad creative side of the house, for anything else that's outward facing and branding, social media as well. But it knows from a design standpoint, here's the brief in terms of, well, it's really more of a creative brief than a design brief of what I actually want to do. I'm going to make this a little bit less code, more real here in a second. Let me show the last one, which is a prototype spec. The prototype spec. Prototype in terms of this is what actually I'm going to use to prompt into Figma. So with Figma Make, I know what it actually needs to optimize for. It's taken that context kernel, it's converted it with the requirements into a design prompt that I can now go paste into Figma. Now, in this, it could be tweaked a little bit more to say, like, here's the design componentry that we're using, if you're using Shad CN or whatever you might be. I know it sounds a little bit technical. It looks maybe a little bit technical. It genuinely is not, because at the end of the day, when I take these things that it's producing, prompts, etc., I'm just pasting them into somewhere else. And this is not a very elegant solution. But in the case of Figma, for example, I gave it the requirements for what it needed to do in the design, and it produced this. It's not bad in terms of coming up with the way this feature should actually work. It's a clickable interface. This is supposed to be engineering code analysis. It's doing a great job of it. Now I have a pretty good idea from the prototype stage of what I would actually want to do. If there are other versions of it, what I typically would ask it to do is, like, give me 5 different approaches to this problem. Great. I can look at these 5 things and I can decide and evaluate which one meets my goals, which one I want to choose, and which one I want to go implement. So it gives me a lot of choice to curate and evaluate on the things that I actually want to do very quickly. This whole process of getting to here is probably like 2 minutes in now, right? In terms of doing these steps along the way. And the last thing I'll show you, because I don't want to spend forever just kind of demoing the way that all this stuff can work, is that if I want to take this and generate tickets from it, well, that's what I do with Linear. Linear is a fantastic tool in terms of integrations and AI evolutions with it. But earlier, I took the requirements. I had to create all the basically stub tickets for the features we wanted to build that were part of it. And once we found one that was the stub, like let's say it's manager review packs, what I would then say is go back into it and now flesh it out. And so this is all the AI generated stuff coming from that context kernel that said, here's the thing that we know about it from Mark's original strategy positioning document. Now, from a requirement standpoint, here's what you actually need to go build. Now, you may be saying to yourself, Mark, you just wrote a lot of code to generate an old version of a PRD. So what gives, man? You didn't do anything new here. You just use AI to go around in circles. And I will caveat that to the Douglas and the Lincoln Douglas here with Kevin, that you still need to create context and prompts to guide the other agents to do the things that you want to do. However, in this case, this is not static. It's a moment in time. It'll evolve. When I change the prompts, it affects all the other agents that I'm working with at the same time. And in this case, this is not something I'm going to hand off to an engineer. I'm going to actually ask it Linear to triage this through the MCP server and just go build this on its own. And it'll probably be 85% good because of the prompts and context we now have. It does it much better than if I were just to YOLO it through a ChatGPT interface. But that allows us to move much faster, especially with things that are front end. So I'm going to stop there. I knew I threw a ton of things at you guys very, very rapidly, but more so want to just leave you with the idea that I have agents that are my employees, if you will. They all are good at certain things because I've helped them learn what they need to be good at. They have the skills for it. I provide them the context to do it in the way that I actually want, and I command them to go hand off and supervise them to do things along the way. So what I'm left with is decision making. They show me what they come back with. I say whether the work is good or not. I give them feedback to go do it again if it's not, which is not that far off from real life in many ways, except I don't need to give them the positive encouragement. And as part of that, hopefully we move across the process faster, especially for the things that are more lightweight. You won't see me doing this at a big banking company because it probably needs to be a little more documented and regulated. So again, I'll caveat to my Douglas and Lincoln Douglas on that. But certainly for things that are heavier user-facing, earlier stage, more self-contained, I think this is an easier way to move faster quickly. The last thing, and I'll get off and then hand off to Kevin here, is that this is where we're at right now. It is rough. It is not graceful or sophisticated, but it is fast and it's impactful. And where I think things going will be much more mature versions of what I have where you share this context with everyone on the team. So they're all looking at the same prompts and learning from it on the fly, where their workspaces are changing as a result of it. And you will be able to take on heavier, more complex, maybe even back-end infrastructure kind of stuff in the future. Not there yet, but it's amazing how far we've gone in just a few months. So excited to see where it goes next. So hopefully some mildly spicy takes there. Kevin, I don't know. What do you think?
I think you got the chatter going pretty wild right now. Let's actually double back on some of them before we switch over to me. One of the things I think that would be good to clarify for folks is how many of the things that you showed are literally just like completely driven agentically in terms of like the code is being written, the designs are being produced, or how much of is it you still copy, pasting, clicking, waiting, and then, sort of being that human driver?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that two different ways. In terms of this being real, I will say that 50% of the tasks that we have to do are now like pretty much agent handled. In terms of the handoff from one step to another, that's when I'm going a little bit slower on, because I want to make sure that the handoffs, the things I didn't show you, that there's a plan and coordination phase to this tool as well, where it does the work and then stops and asks me, like, am I doing a good job? And so because of that, I don't have it go end to end. I do have that feature, but I'm very cautious about using it right now because I want to still curate very heavily. It'll go more smoother, faster. The last thing I want to do on this, the next step of it, is actually to get it out of Cursor. And the way it's built, I can plug it in with a web interface or put it anywhere where I can give it that command. It'll hand off along the way. So it's going to get much smoother. I'm debating whether to make this just open source so any of you guys can use this and tweak it to your heart's content. Because one of the questions I said is how much effort went into the setup. It took me about 2 hours. I did it last night from 10 to 12. So it is, which means it's probably not great, but it just shows you how much you can do with your two hands in a very short period of time. I'm not an engineer.
Maybe, Mark, you take a quick look through the chat, and then I'll switch over, and then you can see if there's anything that we want to bubble back up. Yeah?
I do want to answer, what does the phrase YOLO it mean? I love it. So YOLO, you only live once. It's basically making like a high risk AI kind of move. You're just like, I'm going to trust you, AI, to take it all the way. And I actually had some fun YOLO experiences where I said, you don't know very much. Just invent it altogether with zero context in what you'll do. And I'm finding actually today, the YOLO move actually is working much better than ever, which was probably one last point to anchor on. It's good to transfer over, is that, listen, there's a huge amount of what we do, which is repetitive. How many landing pages can you create? How many registration flows? How many analytics dashboards? How many navigation flows? It's been done, right? And so sure, eke out the next 0.25% of how you're making it special, but why are we wasting any time doing the work that has been done a million times before? So YOLO mode, that navigation module, why not? There's enough magic patterns out there. You can put it to work and save yourself some time.
Well, to Phil's last comment, don't YOLO in fintech. I happen to work in fintech. And so we're going to see a slightly different version of all this. But feel free to keep dropping questions in the chat. Mark can respond async while we keep going. And since I can't quite share everything as openly as Mark just did, I have some redacted screenshots, but hopefully it still gives everyone the same level of sort of detail that you're hoping for. Okay, cool. I think I'm sharing the right thing. It should just look like a redacted version of Slack. So the commonality, I would say, between what Mark demoed and what I'm going to show is the mentality of how do I, or what are things that I'd be willing to pay someone to do that I can actually build something to do it for me instead. And so I'm going to walk through like a pretty silly minor example in my life, but then I'll also talk about how I'm expanding this beyond the specific thing I'm going to show. So at Stripe, one of the wonderful parts of my job is that I have to review and approve every single change to our navigation. Primary, secondary, tertiary, doesn't matter. And this is to ensure that we actually have like a cohesive entire system and user experience for our entire base. And as you might imagine, like we ship a lot and there are a lot of things to review and consistent patterns sort of come up. So we have the Slack channel that we created called Dashboard Nav Decisions. There's a workflow that we have in Slack there. People submit this thing called a RAPID, which stands for recommend, approve, agree, perform, input, and decide. And I'm the decider. We have a template for it. You would think it goes pretty smoothly, but it turns out people just aren't very good at process. And so with this, we get these links dropped in. And what I found is, this is sort of like a preview version of it. There's a summary up top, a table, and then there's a bunch of context below it on here's why we're doing this change, UXR to back it up, here's designs and screenshots of the change, URL changes, search query changes, all that good stuff. And we also have content guidelines in our internal design system. that people can reference and they know to reference, but these things still don't happen and they get caught up in the process. So we have to like rely on 3 humans to actually look at that stuff. So I reviewed a bunch of stuff, and after, I think hundreds of these, I was like, all right, here are some standards that I need everyone to follow. Wrote some stuff down in bullets. It's sort of written in invariant style where this thing must be true, these things should be true, and these things may be true. But again, I'm relying on studious humans to read this and then like snap to it every time they're doing something that's like not the core part of their job. And so one weekend, I don't know why I got hit with like 5 of these when I really just didn't have the time to review them. I'm like, I would pay a contractor to do this if they were skilled enough to do it. And so what I ended up doing was thinking I need to just build an agent to handle all this stuff for me. So I wrote a doc that is essentially my sort of seed prompt to what I would instruct someone to do. And I'm referring them to the standards that I've written, our style guide that is sort of always constantly being updated, and then issues and solutions. And this is like the key part, right? For everyone who's sort of like tried playing around with this is like the concept of evaluations or evals. You need to give the agent seeding for what good and bad looks like and like how to problem solve. Once they get a few reps of that, they can like do it pretty well consistently. So with that in mind, I went in to sort of seed our system prompt. We have an agent building tool, and you can sort of just read through this with me, but hey, for anyone who wants to use this, this is an agent help review dashboard rapids. Here's the prompt. You're a helpful assistant. You do these things. You're well-versed in these rules and documentations. Here's the format I would like you to output in. And then if I click further, key is here's the tools you have access to, right? Because we don't want this thing running amok and being able to do anything. So I'm restricting its capability. Again, the same way that you would say a contractor that you're bringing on doesn't have full rights access to your entire code repo, right? This is just saying you can read specific Google Docs that are provided to you. You can read the comments in those things. You can search, sort of Stripe directory type things. We have an internal wiki called Trailhead. You can unwrap links if you need to go access those things. You can pull code from our design system. You can read project updates from our issue tracker, et cetera, et cetera. And you can read Slack threads because often they reference those. And you need to be able to unfurl those. So you kind of be able to play that out as you're thinking through the agent. And then you've set up permissions, who can access it, et cetera. So with that all in mind, go ahead and hit enter. Oh, key down here as well is knowing which model to use and then the temperature with which you want them to behave. This is a very predictable workflow. So I need them to not be creative at all and just be like highly to the point and following my instructions. So with that, this is now the interface. And now when a rapid comes in and it's ready for my review, I'm not going to read it first. I'm going to dump it in here. So I'm going to show like the output. I drop in a link. This is one that I did last night. It then sort of shows it's thinking the same way that we expect that stuff. And then its output is pretty darn good. It shows, hey, here's the issue I spotted. Here's the recommendation I have for you. I can then spot check that and then cop into the doc to actually determine whether or not like I just want to copy paste this and send it back to the team, or if there's maybe something else that I need to like add some human judgment on top of, but then I can incorporate that back into the system prompt. So this was 1 hour of work one morning after I was like, I'm spending way too much time reviewing these things. The next thing I'm going to be doing this weekend is why am I waiting until this point? And why am I still putting work on other people to even write this rapid in the first place? What should actually happen is that I build an agent so that someone who wants to do a nav change can just give me their PRD, drop it into an agent. They scrape that. They generate the rapid on their behalf. That rapid gets submitted to my agent here to review it. It passes it back to the agent to say, here's the things that you missed. It gets updated if there's even anything at that point. And then poof, by the time it makes it to me, there's maybe one nit to make, but it's on auto approve at that point. And we can just fly through the thing. And I've now saved work on both sides of that sort of workflow. That's sort of the next step. But as you can tell, this isn't how do you boil the ocean and just like automate all the things. Like you really have to just start with what's the concrete thing that I am doing repetitively, or again, that I would hire someone, pay someone some amount of money to do, such that I could actually build someone to do it for me, or an agent in this case. So I'll pause there, catch up on the chat. I don't know, Mark, if you've been monitoring, if there's anything interesting or spicy to bring up.
Oh man, there's a lot. I'm catching up at the same time. The last question from galleries is like a temperature. I mean, how are you defining the tools?
Gotcha. So two separate questions in there, I guess. Temperature, I mean, it's a like LLM term. It just means how, in my opinion, creative or insane do you want your model output to be? And so whenever someone refers to like hallucinations, the higher the temperature, the more likely you're going to get hallucinations as a result. When you are vibe coding, totally okay. You want it to kind of go a little bit crazy. But if you're doing something that you need precision around, then you want to really lower that thing. But then you can't expect it to be able to be as generative, right? It's just going to follow the things that you told it and like stay in its lane, which in many cases is totally good. And then system prompt. So this is instructions, essentially, right? You are defining what the behavior and expected outcome of the agent you are building to be able to produce. And then the tools are the skills that you are enabling it to have. So you can give it the world, but one of the actually interesting things about this is that similar to a person, the more things you learn, the harder it is to actually remember all those things at once. And so if you just give an agent access to literally every tool under the sun that it can possibly do, it actually doesn't know which one to pick. And so like the statistical probability of it choosing the right thing actually kind of decreases in an interesting way. So you have to sort of start in a more constrained way and then see where it butts up against the edges and be like, oh, it turns out that in this workflow, it really needs access to Slack threads, no problem. Or it really needs access to web search as a tool. Okay, no problem. And that allows you to sort of like incrementally expand its scope of the universe rather than starting with everything and then narrowing it back in, because it's hard to diagnose and pinpoint what's the thing creating lower quality in the output of actions or outputs.
Did you also talk about, Kevin, about like the tools that you're actually using? Are they all homebrew or are you using anything that is open source or someone else?
Yeah, super good question. So as you might imagine, we aren't allowed to YOLO things, and we're not allowed to just like drop random information into any chat tool that's available on the internet. So we have a couple of things internally. We do have like enterprise agreements to specific tools that I will not name, but then we also have our own sort of LLM chat interface that you can hot swap between different models that are, all open source. And that way it's all locally run. Nothing gets moved to the cloud. It's like very secure. And the downsides of that are that you lose out on some of these like extra features that are actually quite nice when it comes to the paid products, whether it's memory or additional tool access or just like the latest thing that's coming out of it. So that's one aspect to it. And then maybe the other thing is we also, per this thing that I'm showing right now, are really we're like actually shockingly good at finding the things that humans have access to and need access to do their jobs, and that are building tool access to those things for agents. This is actually, I think, one of like the big limiting factors in larger companies being able to properly adopt and deploy a lot of this stuff, which is, again, like just put on the hat of I'm a normal person trying to get work done in a big company. And like, what are the obstacles that I encounter? One silly one is I don't have access to that database, or I don't have access to push code, or I don't have insert something. And those are the aspects that you can really reduce the friction on. And then it's just a matter of how do you connect them together and actually have, constrained lanes so that you can control what they can do. And then is there overlap on data from the tools? How do you evaluate the value? Arthi, I don't know if you can elaborate on what you mean with that question.
When you have like a web search, for example, by the way, thanks for this, very useful. When you have web search and then your own proprietary data, the model is going to make a choice of which tool to choose, or you will prompt it to choose something, I guess route it to the right one. How do you know which is better? Like, are you evaluating to say, I would use this tool, this is better value versus not use this tool?
Yeah. So I think there's two separate questions in there. One is like, when I use the word tool, I specifically mean an agent having access to perform an action, right? It's like the MCP version of like APIs. And so that one, it just knows usually. Like that's actually not the hard part. In terms of which model it should be calling underneath, that one we run explicit evals around. So I wish I could show a spreadsheet of this, but there's some like really interesting good workflows that we have that PMs have taken up upon themselves to essentially say, I will spend, an hour or two with my team hand curating the things that we do today that are manual, the quality of the human output of those, run them through all the models, grade them across like 3 different humans, and then that will rerun through them one more time and then see who comes out on top. And then that sort of becomes like the default model until the next time we want to update.
Should we hit some like the topic slides?
Let's do it. So I think everyone can see the slides again. If you can't, let me know. This is just my quick closing slide though, which is I think everyone on this call should be asking themselves, like, how much of yourself have you fired / how many employees, AI employees have you hired? I think that's like the common thread between both what Mark and I have been showing. Okay, so some prompts for us / this group. The first one that I think is very apparent from what Mark showed is like the death of the PRD. I'm not going to read through this live. Everyone can see the text for themselves, but I am super curious. Mark, if you want to kick off, I think you already gave a little bit of a intro to it, but how do you see the evolution?
Yeah, it is a good question. I actually like Sam Ho's comment in the chat as well, and that like a lot of the roles of the things that were there in the past, again, providing context and a static thing and trying to get everybody on the same page. If the world is changing in terms of like, what you're building is changing faster, it's more dynamic, and the people you work with are staying coordinated in a different way, and that you're involving agents in the flow, then I think a lot of the things that were challenging or frustrating about the PRD have to be reevaluated. So one of the way that Sam basically described it, if they have to take a long time to create, no one reads it, hard to keep current, the tools now are really evolving to solving this problem. How do you provide context all the time to the right people for that context to affect the work that they're doing? So the tools that are integrated agents for sure is part of that as well. How do you reflect changes? And I think that changes is not just all happening in the background all the time. You have to have a conversation about that, which we do fairly frequently with us. And then, where are you spending your time providing those requirements and the things that go beyond the PRD? So the short answer I would say is that, the PRDs were really never about paper. They're always been about coordination. And so if that's the case, who is being coordinated and what information is being coordinated is what you're focusing on. It's just that the players and the dynamism of that seems to be evolving fairly quickly.
I really like that framing. I'm going to cheat and take this topic in a slightly different direction, but I think it's still on point. So to the topic of taking people and what they're trying to do and think about how you can put that into an agent. Something else that we've sort of experimented with is synthetic UXR, which is, all right, you have a bunch of user feedback. Like, how do you now create a UXR agent that can actually go through this stuff, comb it, bring up the relevant insights? Same thing on the data side, and then you have like a PM agent that puts those things together and then outputs something that's interesting. The danger in this though, or at least the risk, is I still think for the foreseeable future, there is immense value in you as the PM still spending time with the raw material. Because at the end of the day, the summary that comes out of these things, if you think about how we've all built product to date, we don't build by averages, right? We don't say, all right, we conducted 20 interviews, 17 interviews mentioned they want this feature. Therefore, we're going to prioritize this feature and build it in the way that they described it, right? The whole purpose of product management was not to say X customers asked for Y feature, therefore we build it in the way they asked for. It's X customers expressed this problem. We're now going to explore 10 different ways to solve it and then decide based on how we perceive the importance of some of those individual conversations in order to shape how that product comes into life. And so there's like this really weird period we're going to live through where I totally buy that like eventually we'll get to some place where like maybe there's a little bit less inspection, but that still is, I think, a very core part of the job. And when people refer to taste or judgment or any of that stuff, like the less fluffy way to define that, in my opinion, is that you can spend enough time with the actual content that you have to directly such that you can properly assess the output that the AI is giving you. Otherwise, you are completely delegating the job, at which point, I don't know why you exist. And so like that would be my push on, I totally agree that PRDs were never about the paper, but about the alignment. You then need to make sure that you have enough context yourself to be able to defend and apply and guide that alignment. That'd be like the big push I'd say on this topic.
I like it. There's even more spice coming. I think we should hit some of the next ones.
All right, let's do it. This one is quite good. So if you just look at the sort of hot take quotes at the bottom, AI will make better product calls. I mean, per what I just said, the 90% of us, we just have to tweak the edges. I'm curious where you would maybe disagree with what I just said, Mark.
That about the judgment part, I think there's a lot of truth to that, Kevin. So it's fairly indisputable. I think the idea that AI can make better decisions on certainly anything that has context on, like I just think about all you guys working at big companies that have done 1 million experiments to date. Like if this thing knows those experiments, what's been part of that, and then think about that collectively, that knowledge is pretty powerful to help you do the things that are repetitive or in the same, ballpark. Inventing new things, taking on and making large strategic challenges, like AI can help, maybe not replace. The part I want to push on, I'll say that's a little bit spicy, is that is it really true that AI can't invent, can't have taste? Now, I like to think, for my own job security, that the answer to that is no, but I don't know so much anymore. I put up the questions just every once in a while and say, just tell me what to do in this invention stage. And I'm increasingly surprised at how good some of the answers are. A year ago, garbage, but not that bad right now. Now, listen, you're talking B2B SaaS. Okay, yeah, what are you inventing for the most part in terms of the brand new way that a consumer might engage with a new mobile device? Okay, very different kind of challenges, perhaps. But invention, maybe that is also not a protected domain for PM in the future too. Evaluation and judgment, can those be operationalized with enough data? Maybe. I don't know. I want to think that these things are precious, but I'm just not so sure anymore.
Yeah, the big counterexample to AI can't invent, and maybe someone will say this is blasphemous. Suno is one of my favorite products to mess around with, and every monthly AI series that we host internally, I make a new Suno song, and it's hilarious. And it's not just interesting because it's novel, but it is actually entertaining. And if it can produce something that is in the pure creative industry, I don't see why it can't apply to software. So I'm very much with you on that front. The thing that I was going to say that is more of a question for everyone to consider than an answer is to the aspect of how much do you really need to invent, especially in B2B, I think is a fair question. The thing that I'm not sure about is when you think about browsers like Comet, for example, that's Perplexity's browser that has sort of agent built, agentic workflows built in. How much of your user interface eventually gets interacted with by AI versus a human? And it's all those things. One, the more predictability, it almost doesn't matter how complex or dense an interface ends up being. You could have just forms on forms on forms and forms. It actually turns out maybe Salesforce is the best user experience possible because everything is there and the thing can just understand all of it and take action on all of it. I don't actually think that's true, and I don't want it to be true because I think that there is still a lot of power in building really easy to use interfaces for humans. Clicky boxes are not going away anytime soon. But there is probably some aspect to your product that I think you really need. And to that point of headless, totally. One of the key questions we're asking is, what are ways that we can actually keep people from even needing to log in the first place, right? Because if I can get my entire job done from something like a ChatGPT, why would I not want to? Why do we have to pull them in if our business model doesn't rely on them viewing our UI? So that'd be the other sort of tangent off this one.
Wait, Kevin, I thought you were on the conservative take. That's crazy town, man. That's where I live.
Maybe I'll try to bring myself back to the more conservative side on this next one then. Did you want to hit on the planning, executing, or do we want to shimmy to shrinking PM team?
I like the shrinking one. Yeah, that's a good one. That's pretty hot.
Maybe I'll kick us off on this one. I'll start on the steelman side, which is I don't adopt the mentality that AI is replacing all the people. I maybe buy the AI will take away bad people, people who are bad at their jobs or people who are unwilling to continue to evolve. I much more view it through the lens of the old barrels and ammunition metaphor. I think it was Keith Rabois' sort of original metaphor, which is as long as there are barrels, as long as there are people that are able to drive initiatives, which I think is a key role of a PM, that team's not going away. And the idea that you need these folks in companies to really be the force behind things coming to reality is not going to shrink. If anything, it's going to continue to expand because the ambitions and possibilities of a company are just going to continue to grow much, much faster. So if you think that, the one-person billion-dollar company is true, then that just means that the 100-person, $100 billion company is true. But it just means more outcomes from those same people. That sort of be like my opening argument.
I actually like that. It's funny. There's a conversation that I've seen pop up in threads recently about all the AI talk about companies increasing their performance and increasing their margin by just laying people off thanks to AI, which is, I think, a bit overblown. The question that never gets asked, and I definitely found this first person as well, that nobody's asking, well, how much more can you do? And I don't mean from like productivity standpoint, but how much more ambitious can we be if we're equipped to do all these things? Like, let's take the positive version of that for a second. So there's 50% of the job that I just don't like. There's real toil associated with it, but now AI can automate it. They're actually building these things that are the toil part of it. Shouldn't I be able to be twice, in theory, as available to invent the next best thing that would be amazing for us, that will be hard for AI to reproduce, but is truly meaningful in terms of the company's mission, et cetera? So I think that these both can be true at the same time. The PM team might shrink in terms of horsepower needed to do certain tasks, but maybe at least it stays even, if not grows, in terms of the capacity of what's possible. At least I'd like to believe that. I think the AI is supposed to be empowering versus removing, but I don't know. I don't know if that complements Kevin or as it takes it to a different direction.
Mark, when you think back to your meta days, is at a certain point in a company, like more and more becomes matrixed. And I feel like the role of a PM goes from even the shaping and building to much more purely in the, I'm just here to hold alignment between these different organizations, like make people accountable to like the goals that we've set, right?
Yeah.
How much of that do you think is durable in a world where, we're just building faster, we're able to do more? Like, do we also believe that the agents can keep every human on the rails, or all those humans are agents and so it doesn't matter?
This is a great question. And actually, it's kind of linked to one of the discussions that's going on in the chat from Krish about like how without PRDs and documents, how do people stay coordinated? I want two takes, but I definitely want to hear your take on this as well, because you're living a version of this at the company that you're with now, obviously. So I talk with a lot of people who are at bigger companies about how they use AI, and they all like roll their eyes as they reasonably should when I show them these crazy demos and say, that's just not possible. So you think about what AI use cases matter for them. Like they say, hey, a huge part of my job is coordination. It's navigating the organization, the politics that are around that. So we should talk about how to use AI to understand those dynamics and give you the advice and context needed to be at least more effective persuasively, or from a communication standpoint, to have influence to get things done. So there's one part where like, sure, use AI to do some of those things, but it's still the job of coordination and politics. Now, the spicy take, I will say, tongue-in-cheek, Krish, when I'm about to say this, is that like, why does everybody in the company need to understand what you're doing? All right, so that sounds like heresy. I get it. But does it really matter as long as you're moving forward? Yes, there are some North Star stuff. I get that as part of it. But I don't need everybody to know. Certainly when I was at Facebook, I didn't need them all to know the strategy for what I was doing. Barely even the people on the team. I needed to deliver impact on the direction we're going in. Like Nikhil knew where we were going to go and why it's supported and on up. But no one else needed to know. And again, that's probably taking it maybe too far as an example, but I at least ask the question for a second. Like, how much does that coordination really matter as long as you're driving toward the goal? Crazy?
But my answer to your question, I guess, on why does everyone in the company need to know is because resource allocation, right? There's always competing priorities. And so the better I can articulate and defend why my thing matters, I get headcount, I get budget. Well, what happens when the cost to do that thing goes way, way down by like multiple orders of magnitude? That's when maybe no one cares. Because right now, if I can, sequester one spunky engineer to go do something with me on the side, no one bats an eye at it. You can now produce that same outcome with a budget of $2,000 of like tokens. So I actually think there's like a really interesting thread to pull on there. We'll move on from it, but I actually think that's a really good framing, which is why does everyone need to know? And usually it's just because you need people to help you. And so if you no longer need the people to help you, then maybe you can just get more done. Okay, on to next topic. AI has better strategy. I think, given time, let's hit on the talent bar one first, and then we can always circle back if we need to. But you want to kick us off on this one, Mark?
Yeah, so this one, I'm going to go spicy for a second. Maybe it's not that spicy. I think that in terms of the PM role is evolving, and I think of us more as builders now than PMs. What LinkedIn is doing and creating their builder program, I think is like absolutely the direction that things are going in there. The role has changed. And so I don't know that I would necessarily go as far to say that you need to be able to code, but you absolutely need to understand how to prototype. I think you should absolutely understand how to do evals, although I think that the field of evals is rapidly evolving. So I wouldn't get too stuck on like, here's the way you have to do it, but understanding the purpose of evals and how to approach it is totally important. Glorified note taker might be too strong of a framing of what the role is if you're not doing this, but I think it is absolutely existential for product people or builders of tomorrow to not understand these things. Concepts, familiarity with the tools, asking the questions of how it affects everything you do in a company, the headcount and people parts aspects that you mentioned, Kevin, I think are very, very germane. The scary part I like to throw out there is that when I talk with recruiters, they're not even considering people that lack some of this experience here. And that for me personally is frightening, right? And so the world is changing rapidly, and I think it's undeniable. You have to evolve to be part of it. And so I don't know how spicy that really is, but for me, it seems like pretty clear cut.
I don't know how conservative I'll be on this one as the person currently talking about all the AI things that I think every PM needs to know. But I will say, and I have stood by this, I do think storytelling is going to be a very durable skill. And the way by which you do it and the resources you have available to that, I think are where you should be putting your energy. And this is where I think a lot of PMs have freaked out about vibe coding and prototyping, is because it's just a more effective way for many of them to actually storytell. You can show a thing and they're like, oh my God, I no longer have to rely on someone else to do it. I still don't actually think that means that a really crisp, well-written document is going to go away, because there are some things that are still better articulated through words. And this might just be a market you need to enter or something else. A prototype isn't going to tell you whether or not you should enter the EU for your product, right? There's a different way to approach that. But if you can apply the same mentality and have the same way to approach what are the key points I need to understand in order to make that, and how do I communicate that to whoever I need to convince, that stuff feels very good and durable to me, whether or not that is a PM versus someone in strategy and operations versus, a business lead, debatable, but I wouldn't overfixate on the role. I would just say that skill set is extremely critical. And I think every PM should probably hold on to that one pretty dearly. All right, what do we got here? Oh, one quick thing I want to circle back on. So Shreya, you asked, is there any danger in this speed of shipping, just confusing the hell out of customers and users? Because there's now 1,000 people just YOLOing things into a production app that millions use. Totally. And so this is where, Nikhil, I don't know if you want to chime in. The bottleneck is no longer in how much can we push through the repo. The bottleneck is, do we have enough people to actually review what we are shipping and whether we actually should ship that thing, and how we can then edit that back down. This is one of the things I actually think that a lot of growth stage and larger companies are quite bad at, which is because we measure ourselves by how fast we ship, we never also do the counter measurement of how aggressively are we editing back down. And you end up with a bunch of stuff that isn't used and doesn't need to exist in the first place, which is just product debt.
Yeah, and I think that larger companies have unusual advantages and unusual disadvantages. Unusual advantage in this example is they have so much user base that they can run a exponentially large number of experiments in parallel independently to determine signal. So if you take an example of Facebook, billions of users, theoretically, the agents can run 10,000 optimizations and new features for very, very small populations, and then you could identify what's the higher quality signal. The downside is that the amount of change necessary to be interesting for a product that's mature is so high that you often don't end up seeing much change that end up sticking, which is one of the challenges at scale, which really lends themselves to then the 1,000 smaller products that can go after problems that don't require network effects to take into account. So I think what you're going to see is and I think this is sort of the theme of today's conversation, is the way in which we build products and the way in which AI creates products that are meaningful, and what audiences we can go after and how many of those companies exist, and the organizational charts that exist, both AI as well as human, to go after these problems is under massive flux. And I think if you aren't actively thinking through how to participate and be a meaningful part of that model, I think it's going to be very challenging on your career because of how different we build, how different those products exist in the future, and how, important it is for you to be relevant and current versus what we see in the past. I mean, obviously that's what Skip is kind of all about. So anyway, that was a little bit beyond the question you asked, but a good framing for sort of how we're seeing today's discussion play out in the larger context.
I might add on that too a little bit, Nikhil. I think there's a lot of goodness there. And when I think about Shreya's question, I can't help but think also about our time at Meta, where 15,000 tests are running simultaneously, and how did anything get decided? And honestly, it was just the numbers that basically made the decision, but you did lead to suboptimal tests or things that went to production. My favorite app to pick on right now, and I'm sorry if any of you guys are PMs there, is the DoorDash mobile app. Like, it is just garbage in terms of the navigation at the top of that thing. And the tests that are running, I'm like, what the fuck are you testing? It's a bad experience. And so I understand why. I was in that same seat making the same decisions for Facebook app too. So like, I feel and understand the pain. So for people, as the amount of experiments are only going to increase, and the amount of data that basically shows that this is a good reason, our voice in terms of being stronger, in terms of tastemakers and saying, this is the bar, not just on the quant, but on the qual of what good is, and helping everybody understand that in a democratized way so they can make those same decisions. That is going to be the magic. So the coordination, the communication, the expression of what that is for better decision-making, very, very hard. But that's where I think we have to be, because the volume is only going to go.
Maybe I'll ask both of you in the closing thought here, anything that this group can either do for you, or perhaps another way to frame the question, less personal, is what homework do you have for this group to ensure that they're making optimal use of these next 10 weeks prior to the holidays? Where do you want people to go if you were managing them or supporting them?
It's pretty much this slide. And like, very tactically, I'll walk through something that I'm doing with all my PMs right now. On the note of, prompts to the new PRDs, even though we're in like this really much larger, more regulated environment, one of the key things I am trying to do is compress the product development cycle and ensure that, forget is engineering, product, and design converging, but just how do we, with the people we have, get to the outcome we want faster, right? Like, that's actually all that matters. If there's side effects from that, so be it. And so I saw one person on my team sort of spiraling in a Google Doc on like, what's the right way to do this filtering? And I was like, holy cow, why have you spent more than one day on this? Like, this should have just been one line in one page. And the better way to go about this would actually be, per Mark's Kernel Sanders, just write down the bit of context that anyone who touches this thing needs to understand, right? Who are we building for? Why are we doing this thing, et cetera? From there, any PRD or thing that you want to write, anything that you think that we should be tackling, write it in the form of a prompt. Write it as if you were going to feed it to something that has no other context to go do the thing. And then use that with your designer and your engineer and all the tools we have available to us to actually get to a built thing or 5 versions of that built thing as fast as possible. We can look at that in the span of a week and then figure out which path we want to go deeper on. And so that would probably be like my primary thing that's like very tactical. And the other one I think that's really interesting, if you have the resources to do it, is what's up on the slide. Find out the parts of your job that you shouldn't be spending time on and that you would hire a contractor for, and then just build an agent for it. And it can be a super basic thing. Like, you don't have to do something fancy. Like, Mark is doing his entire company in an agentic workflow. You can just do your Monday meeting or like something else that eats up 30 minutes that you wish you didn't have to spend on it. That'd be my sort of closing remark.
I love that. I definitely want to echo Kevin's last part. Listen, I got in this business because I love to create. I love to build. I love to solve meaningful problems. These tools make it much easier. Find something that you love or a pain that you really hate. Do it yourself. Use the tools and just get familiar with it, because I know everyone feels like they're behind and they're not doing anything trust me, just being here, you're already ahead of a lot of people. So find something that you can go build yourself just to get the experience of understanding, because one, hopefully it'll bring back the joy of the job that we're all in, but two, that familiarity will be invaluable for where you are going forward. So thanks so much, guys. Really great to see all of you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Happy Friday, and join us in a couple weeks as the creator of Figma Make, the lead PM. We'll talk through both IC careers as well as Figma Make and how she sees the future of build going. So hope to see you then, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.